Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to untangle something that's honestly one of the most fascinating, intricate, and just completely complex processes the human brain ever pulls off. We're talking about how kids actually learn to read. And to do that, we're diving into a brilliant visual framework called Scarborough's reading rope, developed by Dr. Hollis Scarborough. Seriously, if you've ever wondered how on earth a bunch of squiggly lines on a page magically transform into vivid stories and huge ideas in our heads, you are in the exact right place. But first, let me ask you something. Is reading just sounding out words, right? For a really long time, a lot of well-intentioned folks thought exactly that. But if you've ever sat next to a young learner and watched them sound out a word perfectly, literally letter by letter, only to realize they have absolutely zero idea what the sentence actually means, yeah, then you know there's a whole lot more to the story. Reading is absolutely not just about decoding letters. It's this highly complex, multi-layered skill, which is exactly why we need a solid framework to actually wrap our heads around it. And that brings us to where this incredibly powerful model actually came from. So, way back in the early 1990s, Dr. Hollis Scarborough started putting together the reading rope. See, she noticed this huge disconnect in how reading was being taught, and she wanted a way to visually show parents and teachers just how many individual little literacy skills have to intertwine over time to create a skilled reader. And this visual metaphor, this rope, it was just so effective that it was officially published in 2001 in the Handbook of Early Literacy Research. It's basically been a cornerstone of literacy education ever since. So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the reading rope framework, then look at word recognition in the lower strands. After that, we'll cover language comprehension in the upper strands, and finally, classroom impact and takeaways. We're going to completely deconstruct this rope before we weave it all back together. Okay, let's jump straight into Section 1, the reading rope framework and its place within the broader science of reading. Now, what's really brilliant about this model is how it takes the entire, frankly overwhelming process of reading and divides it into two distinct, manageable halves. On one side, we have language comprehension. These are the upper strands of the rope. This is all about meaning making. Then, on the other side, we've got word recognition, making up the lower strands. This is the mechanical, automatic recognition of text. The modern science of reading relies super heavily on this exact concept because it shows that reading proficiency isn't just about one single approach. These two halves must combine. You literally cannot have skilled, fluent reading without both the mechanical ability to decode the text and the complex cognitive systems needed to actually comprehend the language.
Moving right along to Section 2, word recognition, or the lower strands. Let's untangle these foundational mechanical skills first.
So the really crucial thing to grasp here is that word recognition isn't just one single action. It's actually a journey made of three vital substrands that slowly tighten together over time. First up is phonological awareness. This is the very beginning of the journey, where a student is just learning to recognize and play with the sound structures of spoken language. Things like syllables, onsets, and individual phonemes. Next comes decoding. This is where they take that awareness of spoken sound and actually apply it to letters and symbols, which lets them read unfamiliar words accurately. And finally, the ultimate destination of these lower strands is sight recognition. That's when reading those words becomes completely effortless and automatic. Now, to understand exactly how we reach that effortless sight recognition, we have to talk about something called orthographic mapping. I know, it sounds like some heavy academic jargon, but orthographic mapping is simply the process that enables readers to anchor words in their memory so they can retrieve them rapidly later. Think of it like a permanent structural bridge in the brain. It takes a word that a kid has painstakingly decoded letter by letter, and it permanently locks it into their rapid retrieval memory. Once a word is successfully orthographically mapped, that reader never has to sound it out again, they just see it and instantly know it. And to give you a sense of just how incredibly powerful this mapping process really is, consider these numbers, 30,000 to 70,000. Literate adults hold anywhere from 30,000 to 70,000 sight words perfectly anchored in their memory. That means you and I can instantly recognize up to 70,000 words in a fraction of a second with zero decoding effort. I mean, how on earth do we build a mental library that massive? Well, get this, skilled third graders who are proficient at orthographic mapping are actually anchoring 10 to 15 brand new words into their sight word memories every single day. It is a tremendous mechanical feat, and it forms the absolute rock-solid foundation of fluent reading. All right, let's jump up to Section 3, language comprehension, which makes up the upper strands of Scarborough's rope. Now that we've got the mechanical word recognition down, how do students actually make meaning from all that text they're rapidly decoding?
As we move up the rope, we find 5 vital threads that make up language comprehension. We've got background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. Each one of these represents highly complex language and knowledge systems. And remember, this is key. These upper strands do not operate in a vacuum. They have to continuously intertwine with those lower, mechanical strands we just talked about. I mean, think about it. If a student has an incredible vocabulary, but they can't accurately decode the specific word printed on the page, the entire reading process just breaks down. The meaning-making absolutely has to weave together with the mechanics.
Let's zoom in on that language structures strand for a second. It is way too easy to get lost in the linguistic jargon here, so let's just break it down into 2 technical but super easy to understand definitions: syntax and semantics. Syntax is simply the arrangement of words. It's the rules and patterns we use to order our words in the English language so they make sense. Semantics, on the other hand, is the actual study of meaning within those words, phrases, and sentences. By grasping sentence structure and word meaning together, a student gets the tools they need to interpret increasingly complex written language as they move up through school. Now, let's look at how this builds into the verbal reasoning strand. This is where reading gets highly abstract, and honestly where a lot of students can easily get tripped up. 2 really crucial components here are inference and metaphor. Inference is the ability to draw a logical conclusion from the known facts or evidence provided in the text, figuring out what the author is saying without them explicitly saying it. And a metaphor, well, that uses a word or phrase to suggest a similarity between 2 completely different things. This kind of verbal reasoning is absolutely essential because students have to learn how to read between the lines, interpret figurative language, and understand relationships that go way beyond just the literal words printed on the page.
The final upper strand we're going to look at is literacy knowledge, and this single strand holds a pretty vast contrast. On the one hand, you have print concepts. This is the foundational, almost physical understanding of how written language actually functions. Knowing that we read from left to right and top to bottom, understanding that there are spaces between words, and distinguishing individual letters from whole words. But then on the other hand, you have genres. This is the much higher level understanding of different types of books, stories, and texts, and the special characteristics that define them. Grasping both, the basic physical mechanics of print and the varied structural styles of different books massively aids a student's overall reading comprehension.
And finally, we arrive at Section 4, Classroom Impact and Takeaways. It's time to weave it all together. We've deconstructed the separate strands, so let's bind this rope back up and look at its practical application.
So the core point of this entire explainer is captured perfectly in this quote straight from our source material. Reading success depends on more than phonics alone. Students need both strong word recognition and strong language comprehension. Foundational decoding and phonics instruction are absolutely critical. There is zero denying that. But building vocabulary, oral language, background knowledge, and reasoning, those are equally vital. You simply cannot prioritize one over the other if your ultimate goal is to produce a truly skilled, fluent reader.
Now, a very common question that pops up in literacy circles is how Scarborough's model relates to another really famous framework known as the simple view of reading. Well, the reality clears that up perfectly. The reading rope is not the simple view of reading. While both frameworks successfully explain reading development, Scarborough's model gives us a much more detailed, granular breakdown of the specific subskills that actually make up word recognition and language comprehension. So rather than choosing between them, a lot of educators actually use both frameworks side by side to get a deeper, much more complete picture of how skilled reading works.
And this brings us to exactly how teachers can use this tool out in the real world. This framework provides clear, direct actions and outcomes for educators. By using the rope to identify specific skill gaps, say, noticing a frayed strand in a student's verbal reasoning or phonological awareness, teachers can directly guide their instructional planning. By actively working to build balanced literacy across the whole rope, they're supporting foundational and language skills simultaneously. And by using it to strengthen reading interventions, schools can effectively align their entire curriculum. It's basically this incredibly powerful diagnostic tool that helps pinpoint exactly which specific strand is causing a student's reading gap, rather than just taking a shot in the dark.
Let's quickly summarize our key takeaways from today's explainer. First, Scarborough's reading rope perfectly aligns with the modern science of reading. Second, these upper and lower strands don't just exist in a vacuum. They actively strengthen, connect, and intertwine over time. And third, explicit, purposeful instruction is absolutely required for both the lower strand decoding of words and the upper strand meaning-making of language. Over time, as these strands weave tighter and tighter together, the final result is accurate, fluent, and meaningful reading. Okay, let's leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on. How can you apply this framework to identify the reading gaps in the young learners in your own life? The next time you see a child struggling with a book, try to look beyond just simple phonics. Ask yourself, which specific strand of their reading rope might be fraying? Is it their background knowledge, their vocabulary, maybe their sight recognition? By looking at reading through the lens of Scarborough's reading rope, we can completely change the way we support the readers of tomorrow. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep untangling those complex topics.